Welcome to Inflection Point Podcast, where we cultivate change from the inside out as we ponder the Cairo question. Will Cairo have to protest in his lifetime for the birthright to freely and peacefully exist in the skin in which he was born? We stand on the belief that dismantling racism goes beyond laws and legislation or politics and economics. Here, anti-racism activation is presented as an inside job where personal transformation and accountability impact social change. So take a seat at the anti-racism activation table with Inflection Point Podcast.
Well, hello, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for the newest episode of Inflection Point Podcast. At Inflection Point Podcast, we are dedicated to the art of listening and authentic conversation. We challenge our audience to listen actively and intentionally for the purpose of awareness, understanding, and ultimately transformation. I'm your host, Anita Russell, and here's a quick hello from co-hosts Mavis and Gail.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mavis Bauman.
Hi, I'm Gail Hunter, and welcome tonight.
And if you've been following us, you see we have an extra face on camera with us today. And I'm so excited to introduce you to this incredible woman. If you caught our last episode, you know that we did a book talk. And the book that we discussed was I'm Tired of Racism, True Stories of Existing While Black, written by Sharon Hurley Hall. And we just so happen to have Sharon Hurley Hall with us in the studio today so that we can continue that conversation. So hello, Sharon.
Hey, Anita, Mavis, Gail. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
So I just want to do like a super quick bio because we want to hear from you. So Sharon Hurley Hall is an anti-racism activist, educator, and in-demand speaker. Firmly committed to doing her part to eliminate racism, she is the founder and curator-in-chief of Sharon's Anti-Racism newsletter. In her newsletter, she writes about existing while Black in majority white spaces and amplifies the voices of other anti-racism activists. Sharon is also a co-creator of Mission Equality and author of another book, Exploring Shadeism. So welcome, Sharon. We are so delighted to have you join us this evening.
Welcome, Sharon.
Yes, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely. So why don't we get things started by you telling us your story?
My story. Now, where to start with my story? Okay, since we're having it related to the book, what I will say is that my story is divided into several parts. An important thing to know about me as the writer of this book is that I have lived in several countries. I was born in England. I grew up in the Caribbean. I returned to England as an adult. I lived in France for a year. I visited the US often. And so one of the things that I aim to do is capture some of those experiences in that global perspective. I was a journalist, a trade journalist in the UK for several years. I taught journalism as a professor at Coventry University, and then I became a freelance writer, and I wrote a lot about digital marketing. But then everything changed. I had experienced racism. I'd talked about it with my girlfriends, as you do. But from time to time, because I'm a writer and writers will write, I'd written a piece about this or that experience, but I wasn't doing it consistently. Then, as happened for so many people, the murder of George Floyd just brought up this wave of tiredness of the whole construct of racism. And I wrote the essay that became the title essay for my book. I wrote I'm Tired of Racism because that was literally how I was feeling. And I listed a bunch of things I was tired of, right? To my surprise, people, because I was just writing for me, it was cathartic. To my surprise, people responded. And I also realized that I had so much more to say Because of course, by this time, we're talking 2020, I'd had several decades of experiencing racism in different parts of the globe. And one of the things that I know myself is that while things may play out differently in different locations, there are aspects of the system that are the same wherever you go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kept writing. And then later that year, I founded my newsletter, and my newsletter became the catalyst for the book. And how that came about is someone said to me, I like your writing, but I don't want more email. So it would be really good if you could, you had a collection of these essays. So said, so done. I started collecting them. And the interesting thing is what's in the book represents a very small fraction of what I've written, because I have kept writing ever since. I publish a couple of times a week, and I have stuff that I haven't even published yet. So that's how I came to write the book, and that is the beginning of my story. The last part of my story is that as a result of doing this, I suddenly figured out what all this writing and teaching and all of this was for, and it all came together. So now I work in this area, and that's why I'm the co-founder of Mission Equality. The whole point is to bring about an equal world. So now everything is more or less in harmony.
I love the way you started off with connecting your story specifically to the murder of George Floyd. So we've had on this show, Mavis Gale and I have had multiple conversations about what we call our George Floyd origin story. And a lot of people that I've come in contact with had a George Floyd origin story. And one of the things that I did earlier this year is that we actually assembled a group of those individuals together and created this anti-racism activation summit for 2023. And in that summit, the primary topic was, tell us your George Floyd origin story. Because what I have found was that incident sparked so much activity. So it wasn't just a spark around people talking or people writing more, although that was all a part of it, but it was just that people were propelled into action. And so if you could tell us a little bit more about how that propelled you into action, that would be great.
Absolutely, absolutely, Anita. I realized that I had to stop being quiet. I realized that too many people, the thing with what happened to George Floyd is that it was both shocking and not shocking if you were a Black person, right? And so when one of the things that happened is, people got activated, is that a lot of people, for a lot of people, a lot of white people mostly, or white presenting people, this was the first time they had really seen this racism that we've been talking about all the time. And so what I realized is that it's up to all of us to use our gifts. I am a writer. I've been a writer for decades. And so writing is the tool that I can use to give people, primarily white presenting people, an insight into what it's like to walk in this skin in different parts of the world. And the interesting thing is that people, because I talk about my experiences in different places, but wherever people come from, they recognize those experiences. They connect with those experiences because they've had similar experiences wherever they happen to be. And so for me, it was a case of, I'm going to start writing. I'm going to keep writing. And I kept writing. And at the same time, Black LinkedIn suddenly became a thing, which I think is part of the George Floyd origin story of many people as well. Is because I think that many people like me thought, okay, we can't have this kind of thing happening. We've got to speak out. We've got to let people know what this is really like. And so a whole bunch of people started posting about this, and it became a movement that has grown and grown and continued and strengthened. And so a lot of us connected with each other for the first time. I mean, I've been on LinkedIn for a long time, almost since it started, I think, right? But it was only in the last 3 years that I really started to connect with those people who thought like me and those people who wanted to support change. And so we kept having conversations, and we had events, and we got together, and we created spaces where we could talk, and we did all the things. We did all the things. All of a sudden, me, I'm an introvert, right? I've always been sort of back and staying behind the scenes wherever possible. All of a sudden, I'm out there, I'm doing Instagram lives with people, I'm doing LinkedIn events with people. It's like I'm doing stuff like this, right? So it really made me show up in a different kind of way, right? Because the writing was something that I have done and could do and can continue to do. That is a gift I have, for which I'm grateful. But then to show up to talk to people about the things that you're writing about, to be visible, to be out there. Because I think when you're out there and people are looking you in the eye and you're saying, yes, this is not just words on paper, these are actual experiences, then that does something. People can't hear that, can't look you in the eye and be unmoved, I think.
Absolutely. Mavis Gail, any comments?
Yeah, I am grateful in many ways for this experience to be here on this podcast and to meet you, and so many things I've learned and grown from. But it's time for us all to use our voice, right? And I'm more of an introvert than not, and most people don't believe that, but I really am. And I've had to learn not to be, and I'm still learning how not to be, because I think it's time that we all have to use our voice, and it's so crucial. It's so crucial.
I don't think we have any excuse anymore for being quiet.
Right.
I don't think in 2023 we can claim not to know, right? Information is out there, experiences are out there, things are happening all the time. I mean, just look at the last week, right? It's time for everybody who knows that the way that we've been operating is wrong to stand up, to talk, to speak, to act, to do what they can in their sphere.
Definitely.
I
And
mean, I
we
love
have
the
to
way
look in
you
that
phrase-
mirror, I think, too, and change what that belief is, wherever that belief is, or whatever the specifics are for each of us, in order to begin to stand up and say, this is not okay. This is not going to continue. Yeah, I
I
agree.
apologize, Gail. I started talking over you.
Sorry, that's okay.
Yeah, but one of the things that Sharon talked about was this whole Black LinkedIn thing. And that's exactly how she and I got connected. The way she just described it is exactly how she and I got connected. And part of my George Floyd story, I wrote a book. And then from that book, if you listen to our intro, and I talk about the Cairo question, that little boy, Cairo, is my now 3-year-old grandson. And that was a question that we had proposed in my family. Will Cairo have to protest in his lifetime? And out of that question grew my book. And out of that book grew this podcast. And out of this podcast grew what I like to define as true allyship between Mavis Gail and I. So Mavis, I'd really like to hear some of what you have to say from that George Floyd origin story perspective.
Well, Sharon, I just so identify with you. I think a writer's mind is pretty consistent. We want to be alone and to write instead of to be out front. So the podcast has really been a stretch for me. I was even thinking today, I can't believe I'm doing this. But, I'm so thrilled that Anita asked me. And when I saw the look on the face of Derek Chauvin when he was taking the life of George Floyd, it just broke, it broke all of us. And I thought, no, not under any circumstances. This can't happen. And, a lot of us white folks just don't know what to do. But I'm trying to say yes as much as I can to as many offers as I can. I need to be writing and getting it out there. So maybe we can talk about that offline. Anita pesters me about that. But part of me, is just kind of, I don't feel like I'm know enough on any level about anything. I can talk about what I know and feel right now, but I always am concerned about offending somebody. So it keeps me locked up. Do you have any advice for me?
I do.
Oh,
And
good,
the short version of the advice is, it is better to do something and accept that you will mess up and be prepared to apologize than to do nothing. That's the short version of the advice. A slightly longer version of the advice is, there's a saying that sometimes goes around. It's nothing about us without us. So if you are working for the liberation of Black people and deliberately disadvantaged people, then you involve members in the community in what you're trying to do. So you're here on this podcast with Anita. So you have somebody who can be a touch point for some of those experiences and who can help guide you when you're not quite sure where to go. Follow Black people. Change your feeds. Change your feeds and listen to the people that are talking about this and that have been talking about this all along, not necessarily the people that have just discovered it, right? And talk to the people that you're in the greatest position to influence. People like you, right? People like you.
That's what I keep thinking.
White women like you, when you say to them, hey, here are the things I'm struggling with, here are the things I've learned. Boy, we never thought about this. I get it. I was raised this way too, right? When you talk to those people, your voice as a voice for change is very powerful, right? And then in other spaces, you're guided by the people who should be leading those spaces, because to be frank, part of the reason that we're in this mess is because white people have been trying to run everything.
It's true. It's true. When I've been interested in this subject for many, many years, but something happened in the world with George Floyd. There was so much of the, I'm not sure what it was. If it was a sort of a secrecy or a shell that was just broken. And I kept saying, why didn't I know that? Why didn't I know that? Well, as Anita says, with the internet and the access to all these books and essays that have been written, nobody has an excuse. But I know that there's still a lot of white folks who they don't look into it. They don't care because they don't have to. It's just not part of their lives. And I keep thinking, how can you not care? How can you not care? This affects all of us, as you know. So one of these days, I'm going to make you and Anita, especially Gail too. I'm going to make you proud. I'm not afraid to apologize. I've said some really ignorant things, but I guess I just had to start there, and I know that I'm surrounded by love and support, and it's just such a gift.
I think that when people know that you are sincere, then they will be forgiving. But you have to be open to getting that feedback, that you have to be open to getting that feedback and accepting that feedback, right? And some people are not. Some people are not. And you have to know when you're in the right space to do it as well, right?
Right. I have told this story a few times, but I think it bears repeating. When I was in a Black Studies class at the University of Nebraska, I was in a room with just a couple of other white people and other Black folks. And I said something in class, and one woman jumped up and started yelling at me, or so it felt, and my eyes got wide and I didn't know what I had done. But I learned in a few moments that she was excited, that I was engaging. And it was such a different way of communicating than I was used to in my little quiet Lutheran household, that I just didn't understand her. And from then on, intonation just didn't bother me. But I didn't know. I hadn't experienced that. But she just totally embraced me for being there and being willing.
Yes.
You're right, Sharon. You're right. I'm going to get better at that too.
Well, it's like what, Anita, you always say, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we all have to admit that we don't know a lot. But are you willing to learn? Are you willing to open your heart? And I've had to be willing to learn and open my heart and look in that mirror and say, okay, this is what I can do differently.
Yeah. And I don't feel fragile. I don't think there are a lot of us that are not that fragile. We can do this. Yeah, we can do this. Anyway, that's my piece there.
Yes, one of my pet peeves. One of my pet peeves is the idea of fragility.
Right.
Yes.
As you know.
And uncomfortableness. So what? So what?
The discomfort of white folks in dealing with these issues does not compare to the real harm and trauma that has been done to Black people over generations, and that is still
no
going
comparison.
on. Right. And so, for me, that's not an excuse not to do anything. The fact that you're not feeling comfortable. Black people have been living in discomfort in majority white spaces for centuries. Because those spaces have not been friendly for us.
Exactly.
At all. That's right. Exactly.
So one of the things with this show, and again, sort of evolving out of my own George Floyd origin story, that kind of links to the conversation that we're having right now, is this idea of white folks getting used to the idea of critical self-reflection. And what I mean by that is getting used to examining your thoughts, your beliefs, and your ideas that have been embedded in you from generation to generation to generation. Like, I'm actually working on an essay, sort of this whole idea of when you go back to Birth of a Nation and those things that were depicted in that film that were intended to be embedded. And that movie came out like decades ago, but the impact of that is still here. So again, it becomes this challenge of what Mavis and Gail have experienced in working with me, is that you gotta be willing to go on the inside and examine your own thoughts, beliefs, and ideas. So how do you respond to that, Sharon?
I agree. A lot of self-reflection, a lot of self-awareness. We all learn a lot of harmful things, because it's not just the white folks that learn things from those harmful depictions, right? And so we all have a lot of unlearning to do. It is difficult. And I say this as someone that grew up in a formerly colonized country, right? In formerly colonized countries, white supremacy is still there. Even when there are Black people all around you, there are still remnants. There are still places and spaces in which it operates. And I was talking to a woman from Senegal who said exactly the same thing. We were chatting back and forth about experiences we had, and she'd had the same experiences there, right? And so I think all of us have to reflect. White folks have to reflect on their part and their inheritance as people who have benefited from the proceeds of enslavement, right? It doesn't mean you're well off, doesn't mean anything like that, but the way the whole system is set up in many countries is built on that very malign foundation. As Black people, we also have to say, well, do we love ourselves fully as we are? Because, that's not what a white supremacist system teaches us, right? So we all have a learning to do, and we all have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, yeah, we could do some work there. We could stand to do some work there.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. In my field, as a therapist, I'm always helping people have critical self-thinking, right? If you want to change anything, you have to be willing to look within yourself. And as we do that, it can be painful, and it can be frightening, and it can be uncomfortable. And that's okay, because that's going to put all of us into that place of willingness to change and an openness to change, and to be mindful and to be aware and conscious. Because if we're unconscious, nothing is ever going to change. But we have to allow ourselves to be conscious of it. It's like knowing that we all come here knowing that truth that we all are deserving of, right? We all come from the same source. But as we've been talking about, that has gotten forgotten, not just Black people, but for white people, obviously. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, we're more alike than we are different under the skin.
Mhm.
Of course.
You know,
And
we
even in
are.
those areas where we are different, that difference should not be denoted as something negative.
Right.
It's
No.
literally, I'm just different. Like my hair's different from yours, but that doesn't mean that there's some negative association
Right, right.
connected with my hair.
That
And so
should not
yeah, go ahead. I'm
shouldn't
sorry.
undermine anybody's perception of our humanity.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So we
We
have
are-
about 2 more minutes and then we're going to go onto our break. And one of the things that we've kind of alluded to in the past, Sharon, is this theme of being Black globally. And I'm sure you may know the woman from Switzerland, Rebecca Stevens Alder, and she came on her show. She was one of the first people that came onto the show when we were kind of operating under that theme of being Black globally. So that's one of the things that when I heard your story that really drew me to you is the fact that you've lived in multiple countries and have had similar experiences, and also being able to talk to some of the people in those other countries. So we're going to take a break. We'll go ahead and take a break now, and then we'll come back. And I want to kind of dig into that a little bit more with you, this idea of being Black globally. So we'll take a very short break and we'll be right back. So welcome back to Inflection Point Podcast, and we are engaged in a very provocative conversation with Sharon Hurley Hall. So when we took our break, we sort of started talking about this issue of being Black globally. So Sharon, if you wouldn't mind responding to that.
Absolutely. And can I also say that Rebecca was one of those writers that I connected with when I first started writing. And so she and I've had a couple of conversations, and her work, I think, is very important. And one of the reasons that we connected so quickly and so firmly was because we were talking about experiences in different places. Because there's often there's stories that are told, right? Some people say, oh, racism in the US is the worst racism there's ever been. No, it's not. Right? Racism, it started, with 1619 in the US. No, it didn't. It's like, actually, I learned something. I was watching a program called Exterminate All the Brutes. It's like a short video series, and it's based on a book by Raoul Peck, the one who did I Am Not Your Negro, right? And I learned that one of the earliest cargoes of enslaved people was taken to Portugal in 1450 something, right? Which was even earlier than I had thought, right? So it is, that just goes to show it is a global thing. There were several European powers involved in it. They colonized several countries. They enslaved people in many of those countries. And the descendants of enslaved people are now all over the world, right? You have in the US, of course, in the Caribbean, in England, in different parts of Europe, Black people go everywhere. And many of us, almost all of us whose ancestors didn't remain on the African continent, almost all of us have come from that experience. Even some people that later came to the country through immigration. So Caribbean immigrants to the US and to Europe are descendants of enslaved people, right? Because there weren't Black people here before
Right.
that trade.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I think sometimes we think about the things that divide us, but also for us as Black people, it's important for us to recognize that shared history as well. Someone says, whether you ended up in the Caribbean or in America was just a matter of where the ship landed.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
feels particularly
Yeah.
poignant to me here because I'm in Barbados, which was one of the central points of the triangular trade. right? So lots of ships left Africa and came to Barbados before going on to other parts of the Americas, right? And I don't even know where I'm going with this, but just to
You're
say,
going.
just to say that you have to think about history when you're thinking globally, but then you also have to think about current experiences, right? And so all of us, I write a lot of these stories that I tell in the book. Many of them, but not all of them, are from the 15 years that I spent living and working in England as an adult, right? Interestingly, most of the people that read my book and newsletter are from the US. And there is no disconnect at all in those experiences. When I talk to Rebecca from Switzerland, when I talk to people who live in Denmark, when I talk to, people from the African continent who have immigrated to the US, all of us share those experiences. It's not, the system that insists that people who look like me are somehow lesser is a global system.
Yes.
It's a global system.
Yes, it very much is a global system.
Yes.
And that's why I wanted to focus on this idea of being Black globally. So we've actually had some really good discussions. Like one of the discussions that we had was when the young girls from South Africa decided to protest because they were told that they could not wear their hair the way their hair kind of grows out of their head. Right. And so, when we were planning, the idea that popped into my head was, if I can't be Black in Africa, where can I be Black?
Right.
Oh, Anita, that is actually a great example.
Yeah.
Because of having to have things like the Crown Act in the US.
Right.
I've seen kids in the stories where kids in the UK had their hair cut when it was just the way that it was styled. I remember myself going for a job. I think I was going with an international airline. I was young. I was going to, and I had my hair braided. And they said, well, if you get the job, you can't wear your hair like that. Right? So this is a thing, this idea that the way the hair grows out of your head is wrong. And I wrote about flipping the script. If you, as a white woman with your long straight hair, went to work in an African country and they said, oh, no, that hair is completely unprofessional. You've got to have it like us.
Right.
Something that your hair was not intended to do. Wouldn't that be totally ridiculous?
It'd be ridiculous. And if they grabbed it and cut it, it would be like, we would consider that a serious invasion.
Yes. Right. Oh, yes.
Total
violation. The thing of it is, just because you cut it doesn't mean it's going to grow out in a different way.
Oh, that's right. It's going to continue to grow that way.
The same way.
And can we just say, don't touch my hair? Can we just say that?
Yeah.
I've got that one.
Say, take your hands out of my hair. The number of people that have said, oh, yes, let me just, it's like, no. Am I putting my hands in your hair? No, that's not a thing.
Don't touch my hair.
Yeah, exactly.
And it goes back to that idea of the ownership of Black people, Black bodies, of, many white people feel that they have the right to do that. And they are affronted if you tell them no.
Well, it's like a self-righteous entitlement.
Oh, yeah.
To say,
they'll start crying too.
Yes.
Anyway.
No, it's just
it's like you said, it goes back to that ownership. I was asking a question to Anita the other day, and I could just see her. She was, upset, and it was so much deeper than the question I was asking. And just watching her got me to closer to where she was. I always use this argument about, in the Midwest, you'll tussle a person's hair as a sign of affection. And I was equating that because I just didn't know. I didn't think I was doing that, but I grew up in this society.
Yeah.
So, and you see, Yeah, that is like that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing for
Oh,
Black people.
yeah.
That is just because
Mhm.
that's generational trauma in action right there,
Mhm.
Exactly.
right? Because I tell you, you feel it the first time someone white attempts to put their hands in your hair, even if they've never done it before. That is generations of not being able to say no to
Yes,
that,
yes.
and you don't even know, you know, you don't even realize till it happens how deep it goes.
Right.
And there are a
Mm.
lot of things like that. There are a lot of things like
Yeah.
that.
So many
know.
things.
Things like, and this happens, this is another global Black experience, right?
Mhm.
I've had it happen to me
Mhm.
in England, in many countries, actually, many countries. I've been to many countries, right? I, as a Black woman, I am 5'10", I am dark skinned, I am hardly invisible. I'm walking along the road. The number of white people that will just barge into me, right? It's like they expect me to get out of their way.
For you to move.
They behave as if they don't see me, right? Black people don't do that, you know.
No.
They will get out of your way, they'll nod, they'll acknowledge your presence. The white people will not acknowledge my presence and will barge through me as if I don't exist and they never saw me. Right? And
Yeah.
that right there is a global Black experience.
Mhm.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
So could we shift the conversation a little bit? Because I'd like you to talk about your mission equality.
Mhm.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, ironically, this company was founded after an incident of racism at a previous company. Right? I was working with my current co-founder at an edtech startup, and her co-founder was a white presenting woman who was extremely racist towards me and others. And long story short, refused to take accountability, ended up taking the whole company down. Right? That was the end of that. Right?
Wow.
So after that, we thought, because we had been talking, you know, we wanted to do something more active in terms of bringing about this equal world.
Mhm.
And so, you know, last June, we founded what became Mission Equality. It's been through a couple of name changes,
Mhm.
right? And so we eventually rebranded because we wanted the name to reflect what the mission was. And the mission is bringing about an equal world. And there are several ways in which we envisage doing that. We actually released a black paper on equality, which says, here's how we got here, here's the vision, and here are some of the ways we think we could get there. One of the ways we think we can get there is by changing leadership, the way that leadership operates in that white supremacist, colonialist, capitalist, extractive paradigm, right? And so we're currently doing a leadership program that is going to offer potential leaders a new approach, either as individuals or as groups. We're using our company as a test case. We have a very flat structure. I mean, Leah and I are co-founders, but everybody's on the same pay scale, right? It's just the number of hours. Although we do have a reparations boost for global majority members, right? We're pre-funding, so you know, we're about to sign a big contract, and once that's signed, we'll actually be able to put this into action. But this was on the cards all along. We have a decolonizing period when people start working with us, right? Where they can just get to know the company and there are not too many expectations, right? And people can change their roles as well. If they, you know, you might join the company and say, I want to do X. And then as you get on board with the mission, you might think, actually, I think I can make more of an impact here. And that's absolutely fine, right? So things like that. And it really is about encouraging people to look after themselves first.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Right? And, you know, and we have a no rush culture, a no rush and no hustle culture. Right? And so, you know, we're working on our MX of Equality, that's the leadership program. We also have the Anti-Racist Leaders Association, that's like an active advocacy and education space, which we have like a WhatsApp group, we have an education session once a month and a Q&A. So people can come and ask questions, and we make ourselves available for them to come and ask their questions about racism and allyship and anti-racism. And, what else? And eventually, we're going to tackle it from the other end and think about what happens from the school end. What are we learning or not learning? And, one of our favorite words is decolonize. We want to decolonize everything, right? We want to bring in some of those perspectives that have been lost or hidden or derided from the past. We're deliberately global majority led. We will deliberately have a majority global majority team, and we are privileging those perspectives that have been hidden, because there are enough old white men talking about stuff that got us into this mess, right? We need new ideas, we need new approaches.
Yes.
And so I really the black paper sets out our initial vision. There will be others in that series, and anybody can download that for free on our website. And we're really excited about it. We're really excited. We've done some work already consulting with a couple of companies that are progressive. We find that companies that are progressive, that want to do things differently, are a really good fit for us, right? And who are prepared to say, okay, let's throw out all this stuff that we have learned and try a different approach that is going to bring about a more equal workplace, a more equal organization, and eventually a more equal world.
Wow.
So you go to companies and speak? Do companies bring you in to speak, or is that part of the plan?
They have not yet, but they will. we did last year we spoke at a couple DEI events about our vision, and it is our intention to do that more often. But we've also gone in, we've worked with companies, and we will do some more of that. And then eventually we will have our program ready that people can just they can self-pace as they work through it.
Yes, yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's a
Wow, that's it.
incredible
Yes.
model.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely a decolonized model.
I love that word. I love you using that word.
Definitely is. So I'm excited to kind of learn more about it as you all are moving forward in the process and everything. So so we're almost winding down in terms of our time. So what are those final thoughts, Sharon, that you would like to leave with our audience?
It's never too late to start being anti-racist.
Yes.
Anti-racism is active. And so while there is lots of information out there, and reading and learning and expanding your knowledge is part of it, the question that I always ask is, what are you doing to make things better in the sphere where you operate? Yeah. So I would really urge people who haven't yet got started to start today, to think about our common humanity, to work towards a more equal world, and to remember that any progress that we make towards equality, towards recognizing the humanity of others, towards getting rid of racism, is a useful step. And also remember, nothing about us without us. Know when it's time to be led by others in the community that you want to be active in.
Amen. That's
right.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yes.
Mavis, Gail, final thoughts to Sharon?
I do have a quick question for Sharon. Do you we're seeing a lot of these conversations happening now. Do you see the momentum sufficient to keep going forward, that we won't slip back into complacency? I mean, in a big way. I want this to go forward, obviously. But how can we keep from slipping back,
That's going to take all of us continuing to talk, continuing to act, continuing to do programs like this, continuing to get the word out, and individually making the choice that this matters. Individually making the choice that this matters and this is important, and doing what we can. and also putting pressure on the people that are underpinning the harmful systems to make change through voting, through legislation, through whatever it takes. So we have to act, and we have to keep acting. I think there's definitely been a little bit of a backlash. I think that there are people that would like to see this all go away, would like to see the progress undone. And it's up to those of us who think differently not to let that happen. And we can do, you know, we can't necessarily change everybody's minds, and we can't force the people that are not there yet to be where we are, but we can show them through our actions, through our words, through our writings, that there is another way to think. We can encourage them, we can talk to the people in our sphere, and we can keep the momentum going. That's what we have to do. We cannot afford to give up.
Your book, I'm Tired of Racism, should be read by every white person on the planet.
Everyone.
It is so consumable, so understandable.
It's so relatable. It's just really
so relatable. Yeah. I'm going to recommend it to all my friends.
Yeah. It
Thank
really
you.
is. Yeah, and it really is sure.
I'm going to keep it on my phone so I can keep reading it again and again on my Kindle. It's just, I just think you did a great job of delivering the message concisely and clearly.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to read it and really explore it in depth. And I appreciate having this space to come and talk about it and some of the issues that we're all fighting for. You know, this better world that we're all fighting for. It's so important.
It is crucial. And it's going to benefit everyone. This really is a movement for everyone. And we have a conscious awareness that may not have been there before. It's time to act on that, as you said. And we all have a way that within us that we can choose to act on in some way. And that's really just taking that next step. It's almost like when you've broken out of denial enough, it's really hard to go back into denial. And I think that's what's happening now. It's not going to happen, because there's still constantly something else coming up in the news or whatever that says, wow, this is really right there. I cannot deny that. Yeah.
That's
and I think, coming back to what Anita said at the beginning, you know, the George Floyd origin story, that was a case of you cannot unsee what you have just seen. You can no longer, you know, after that, people could not lie to themselves. Right? Yeah. And so we can't forget about it. We can't forget about him. We can't forget about how important that moment was and the change that has to come about. Yes. Because it's not just of George Floyd, but all the harm that has been done over the centuries and continues to be done.
Everyone, that's right, who has suffered from it.
Yes. Because the George Floyd moment was a culminating moment.
Exactly.
And it, you know, because there was Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, like in the same time span, so to speak. And but that was it was almost like that became a call to action in and of itself. It became a call to action. And speaking of call to action, Sharon, can you call out your websites or any other information that you want our audience to follow up on?
Absolutely. Thank you all. You can check out our Black Paper and Vision for Equality on missionequality.com. You will also find links there to our Anti-Racist Leaders Association. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or on sharonhh.com. And you can find my book on Books to Read. That's a number 2 / Tired of Racism.
Excellent. So we have about maybe a few more minutes. And so Mavis and Gail, I'd like you to kind of call out your websites, because besides this, we actually have other things that we're involved with that are indirectly connected to the work that we're doing on this platform. Gail?
Sure. The website, it's a nonprofit that I represent. That's called omapittsburgh.org. www.oma.pittsburgh.org. And we have a variety of different programs. That we have a youth-centered program in the city that we provide programming and camping. It's trauma-informed for the kids and adolescents. We have a trauma-informed webinar that we do once a month for any survivor of trauma. We do training for different organizations. We have a lecture series that we highlight holistic practitioners. So we have a variety of different things. So please come and check out our website. And as a nonprofit.
And I'd also like to point out that OMA is actually our current sponsor for Inflection Point podcast.
I was just going to say that. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
We sure appreciate that. I am president of Seed a Better Life. It's a nonprofit that supports orphans and vulnerable children in Rwanda. We started with genocide survivors, and this all pulls together for me in education. I believe that kids who are educated will make different decisions in terms of how they live out their lives. And what we're doing here on the podcast is about education and also not othering any group. So please go to www.seedabetterlife.org and check it out. See what we're doing. It's pretty exciting.
Thank you, Mavis. And I would just like to call out my website, which is the place to soar. And that's the place where all of my personal transformation activity actually occurs. So I have workshops, masterminds, just-in-time learning, and different things like that. So I'd like to leave you all with this final quote. And this actually is a selected quote from a book review, Sharon, that you had done. And the book was Waking Up to Better Allyship, right? So here's the quote. When people with power get called out for causing harm and claim they feel unsafe, what they really mean is that they feel challenged and uncomfortable. When marginalized people experience harm and demand safety, we mean safety in the most literal sense, safety from mental, emotional, and physical harm. So Sharon, I want to thank you for so graciously attending and becoming our guest on the show. And for those of you out there who are listening, you can also go on our Facebook page because go on Facebook because we do have a private Facebook page for Inflection Point podcast. So thank you all for joining us. And you have been listening to Inflection Point podcast here on Transformation Talk Radio. We are here every first and third Wednesday of the month at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Inflection Point Podcast, where our mantra is cultivating change from the inside out. The journey towards anti-racism and social change doesn't stop here. Truth, reconciliation, and healing come from ongoing, open, honest, and deliberate conversations. Continue to dive in and deconstruct your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs as we band together to manifest social change. Tune in to Inflection Point Podcast every first and third Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, here on TransformationTalkRadio.com for more conversations about how we can cultivate change from the inside out.